Hi and welcome. It's Michigan's AutoTalk Podcast. This is episode 90, and we remind you every episode of Michigan's AutoTalk is all about celebrating the automobile, everything automotive, and we're also about helping and supporting and often teaching you, car and truck owners across our great state of Michigan, birthplace of, well, at one point, nearly everything automotive. You, as always, will find us on the iHeartRadio app, also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, and of course, your Amazon Alexa smart speaker. We're very pleased in this episode, as always, we are to welcome back Jeff Gilbert, automotive reporter with CBS News Radio, also with WWJ News Radio in Detroit. You'll hear him there, and you'll hear him locally on Wood Radio on occasion, and just about anywhere you're listening to CBS News Radio. Jeff, Happy New Year, by the way.
Hey, Happy New Year to you as well.
And I am the producer of this podcast. Hosts Al Schwinkendorf, John Puhek are here. This is episode number 90. We wanted to spend a couple of moments with you talking about something that none of us have been to. It is the thing that dominates the news cycle, at least in terms of not a hard news story, but that's, everything tech, and that's the Consumer Electronics Show. It was January 5th through 8th in Las Vegas. You were there. You saw it all. I know you've been there before, correct?
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, I think this is my fourth time there.
Okay.
How long has it been that
and I have to correct. I have to correct you. Seen it all. Nobody can possibly see it all. With I've never. There's no show that's this big. We can get into that if you want to.
Well, and how long has it been that the auto manufacturers and that were into that? I mean, before it was, Apple Android stuff and junk like that. And now cars are so technical and electrified that it's been, I don't know how many years it's been, but it was big news when the auto manufacturers started getting into the Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah, they said that Delphi was actually the first auto manufacturer sometime in the 90s to get into it. Okay. I think they got into it in a big way in 2007. Remember Rick Wagner from General Motors?
Yep.
He went out there to give a keynote speech, and they brought a vehicle that's called the Boss. It was a big, but it was an SUV. I can't remember whether it was Chevy or GMC, that they equipped with a ton of computers in the back that could in a limited way drive itself. So it was kind of the original self-driving car, and they were giving people rides in this thing. It was kind of cool. You sat in there and you actually watched this arm turn the steering wheel, and they opened the back. The entire back of a full-size SUV was filled with computers to make it run. But it was actually the beginnings of that, and since then, that's obviously been a big feature. And car makers, CES, the main Las Vegas Convention Center, now has 4 halls. There's a brand new one that's about twice the size of Huntington Place in Detroit. That's where they put the automakers. So they have the largest hall for the automakers, and it is filled with auto companies, auto suppliers, and tech companies like Amazon that also supply the auto industry.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, another big thing they did back in 07, 08, 09, whenever it was, is OnStar came out, and that was their big push. It's like, we have this technology now in your automobile, and so they thought they ought to be theirs, from an article I read.
Yeah, OnStar actually came out in the late 90s, but in 07, the time I went there, one of the reasons I went there is OnStar was making a big push, and they were also sponsoring our auto show coverage. So I kind of piggybacked with that to go to CES for the first time. So
that was probably it, the big push.
Yeah, and believe it or not, that was GM's big push this year at CES was OnStar, because they've advanced it so much. Obviously,
glad to see they're evolving.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? It's not just OnStar. They're trying to evolve it into an app. They're trying to evolve it into connected services, all sorts of other things. So they were there with that this year.
Yeah,
there's a guy in Kalamazoo that owns a Subaru Volvo dealership. Him and his daughters are his general manager, and they just came out with a new commercial, and it's about his younger daughter who got in an 80-mile-an-hour head-on crash in her Volvo, and she survived. And he talks about how, Volvo called 911 before anybody else did and everything else. And it's a really, really powerful advertisement. Yeah. And it's all about that type of stuff.
Yeah, and again, as they say, safety sells. OnStar has been promoting safety and security for many years, but that can only take you so far. So that's why they're getting more into connected services. They're getting more into app-based things. So you don't have to have a GM product to have OnStar. You can connect your smartphone to OnStar in another vehicle. There are a number of other things that they're promoting. Another cool thing they had was a game that lets you simulate driving in an not an automated, but in an electric vehicle to show you how it's different. So, they were promoting that as well.
Well, and to go back to the how it's not only GM. I just installed one of those rear view mirrors with the OnStar button in a I think it was like a Hyundai Santa Fe or something.
Honda Civic.
Okay, yeah. They all blend together. But it was very cool, and I didn't know that OnStar had gone into other market or other car manufacturers. So it was kind of cool to see that the kid just brought everything. Here's the kit. Here's everything.
Honda part.
Exactly.
Yeah. That actually is older technology. They've been doing that for about 5 years. The newest technology, and please don't tell your customer this, is something where you don't actually even have to install any hardware. It's actually based as an app in your smartphone. So people can get OnStar without even installing.
I never knew that,
or something like that in there. Again, it's all brand new, and as they say, it's evolving. Car companies have learned that that they can add a stream of revenue after you've purchased the car. So subscription services, things like that.
Exactly. I was going to say,
Sirius XM.
Talk about subscriptions because that's
Sirius XM. I don't know how much the car makers make from that, but it's an old story. They missed the boat on the car phone many years ago when people first had cellular phones. They were installed in cars, and all of a sudden they're getting installed, and the car makers are going, why aren't we making money off of this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good, because, that's really industry news is all talk about car makers and subscriptions and governments that want to shut them down for it. And it's not going to stop. It's just the way it is.
Jeff, we don't have a lot of time on this. I want to make sure we give you a chance to kind of highlight some of the key takeaways you saw as an automotive reporter, as we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago. Delphi, one of the first companies there, now it is dominated. There's a whole hall, as you said, for the Consumer Electronics Show. And just highlight for us some of the key things you saw, things that were really interesting, and maybe the top 2 or 3 or 4 things you saw.
Yeah, first we'll talk about devices, but before we talk about car makers, and I do want to talk about car makers as well, but suppliers have a big presence there. Out in West Michigan, Gentex, a very big supplier in that area. They're located in Zeeland. They have factories there. They have their headquarters there, and they were known originally for self-dimming mirrors, but they're also making high-tech mirrors. They've added a camera in their mirrors, which would be the equivalent of a dash cam. So it would consistently record, and you could save it if there were an event that you saw, you had an accident or something like that. It can record so many hours on an SD card nowadays, and it just continuously records, and you have time to say, hey, I want to save this part of it before it erases over there. That they also showed a cool camera that will look back at you. Driver monitoring has become important with automation, hands-free driving. They want to make sure your eyes are on the road. But this particular camera is so high-tech, it can actually spot things in vehicles. So if you, say, left your wallet in your car, it could send you a notice saying, hey, you left your wallet sitting in the car. So that's kind of a cool thing. Another cool thing, which is warm, supplier ZF, or however you want to pronounce it. It's a long German word that I can't pronounce, even though I had a year of German in high school. They came up with a heated seatbelt. We've got heated seats. We've got heated steering wheels. This theoretically puts like a blanket in front of you where the seatbelt radiates heat. It's partially to make drivers more comfortable. It's also partially because of EVs. The heat takes away range, and if you're warmer because of this seatbelt, you can set the thermostat lower. So those were a couple of the more interesting devices. There was another device from Bosch for ride-hailing services, where they can record inside the vehicle to make sure, customers are doing things okay, and actually get a panic button on there to call a call center where they could report an unruly or drunk ride-hailing passenger. That obviously could be a major issue in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
for sure. For sure. I'll tell you, I got a Ford hybrid pickup truck, and I drive around. I'm like a mileage maniac. So I drive around with the heat off a lot of times and crank up the heated seat to keep me warm, because electricity doesn't bother it, just so I don't have that thing on there that engine is on because of heater setting until it warms up.
And very, very quickly from the car company side, Ram introduced their electric pickup truck, and the car company that probably tried to make the biggest impression there was VinFast, which I would imagine most of the people listening to this don't even know who VinFast is. They're not selling in Michigan yet. They're not saying will, but they're a Vietnamese car maker that wants to bring a full line of electric vehicles here. They had a whole fleet of them there where they were offering people free rides, and they had one of the biggest displays of anybody at CES. I asked them about it. They said, hey, we're hitting the West Coast first. We want to hit the tech market. We want to get them interested in it. And that was the impression they wanted to make. And I had a chance to be in one. I didn't have a chance to drive one, but I had a chance to be in one for probably about 20 minutes.
Not bad. Not bad at all. You said there was a Vietnamese car company there that really got a lot.
That was VinFast.
Okay, VinFast. Okay.
So would you like to know my impressions of the vehicle?
Yeah.
Of course we would.
It was a very nice interior for 2005.
Okay.
Oh,
kind of like when Honda started out.
Well, yeah, and I mentioned that to a friend of mine who works for a supplier, and I found out the backstory behind that. It was they want to get to the U.S. quickly, so they essentially purchased a bunch of manufacturing equipment that was cast off from BMW.
Yeah,
and that allowed them to tool up quickly. It's not a BMW; it's a mass market vehicle. Most people have not been in roughly 70 to 80 vehicles like I am every year. So for a lot of people, that may be perfectly acceptable. It's nice, but it's a bit dated. And they also went with the classic Tesla idea of slapping a computer screen in the middle and putting everything on there. So it'll be interesting to see how buyers react to that. And I was kind of surprised that I could never get them to say to me, to answer the question, why should a customer buy a VinFast vehicle? I thought maybe, well, they would say, hey, they save money, this or that. All they could say is, hey, it's got cool technology. So, we'll see how they do.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. And I guess the last question I got to ask you before we wrap up this episode, any flying car technology? That's the hint every year.
Well, yeah, everybody's doing flying car technology, which are really those, electric, short-range, air taxi type vehicles. We'll see how it happens. It was actually the last time I went to CES back in 2020, Hyundai showed off an aerial taxi concept. We've seen a lot of those. We saw those at the Detroit show. And as of yet, there are still issues like weather and things like that. And local communities, the first time one of those crashes on somebody's house, there could be a little bit of a backlash from people in the community. I mean, bad things happen to every vehicle. I'm not saying they're inherently unsafe, but things do happen. And, when a car crashes, it doesn't have the same ability to do damage as when an aircraft crashes. And cars are sensitive to the weather, but not as sensitive as aircraft. So these are issues that these companies gloss over a little bit, but they're going to be significant before they deploy these.
Curious but dumb question.
I love curious but dumb.
Do regular people go to this thing? The Consumer Electronics Show?
It is a trade show.
It is all trade. Okay.
Yeah, it's all trade. So people, those of us in the media are let in for free because they like to have the publicity. But I mean, people pay several $100s like they do for an ordinary trade show. So I guess if you were a regular person, put up your own website and went to it and said you represent a certain company and wanted to pay the money, they probably would, they wouldn't say, oh, no, not you, but you have to be representing some sort of company.
Well said. He is CBS News Radio automotive reporter, also with WWJ News Radio, Jeff Gilbert. Always fun to have him on. He's been our guest on this episode of Michigan's Auto Talk Podcast. And until next time, I'm producer Phil Tower.
I'm Al Schwinkendorf.
I'm John Puhek.
Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
Hey, thank you.